Hi everyone, welcome to the Muse podcast. My name is Heather and I was diagnosed with Meniere's disease and vestibular migraine in 2017 and found myself craving connection with other warriors and found the more warriors I met, the more inspired I was and that my hope for healing came to life. I created this podcast to share stories of vestibular warriors, regardless of their diagnosis or where they are in their journey, to give hope so no one feels alone. If this podcast may benefit someone in your life, please forward this to them and make sure you hit the subscribe button. If you know someone with an inspiring story, please find my contact information below. We all have a story. Let yours inspire others. Have you ever had one of those conversations that softly changes your perspective? Where you sit back and just have to allow the moment to sink in, to let the words take root. This conversation is one of those. Michelle Irving is a pioneer in the chronic illness space and mentors women around the world to step into a deeper, positive relationship with themselves while living with chronic illness. She teaches how to create a life filled with love, meaning, and shows you how to step into your deep personal power. She speaks from a place of sovereignty and teaches how this can set the tone for all relationships. She's the host of a beautiful podcast named the Pajama Interviews. Her guests have created lives filled with love, compassion, and personal power around their chronic illness. Please welcome the Queen of the Underworld, Michelle Irving.
Well, Michelle, first off, thank you for being here and agreeing to meet with me and share your story.
So it's gorgeous to be here. Thank you so much.
If you could tell us a little bit about yourself, your diagnosis, and then we'll just kind of take the path to where you are today.
Sure. So I think a couple of things. My vertigo, we call it in Australia vertigo-associated migraine, which is the same as vestibular disorder. It's just what we call it. That was actually the second diagnosis of a chronic illness for me. So I was diagnosed with an autoimmune condition in 2005. And that is a life-threatening condition that I have. And that was a very long journey of medication and being bedbound and quality of life, really big quality of life discussions.
Yeah.
But for the conversation that you and I are having, that diagnosis, after long periods of being in bed and off work, I made it back to work 5 hours a week, spread over 3 days, and slowly built up to a full 3 days, which is what I worked. I had a full-time career. I really negotiated as I climbed to work more part-time. That's what I traded, the income for the time.
Right.
And that's really because about the value of life that I hold. So 2 years, I had okay, we're back, 3 days a week, which was the equivalent of full-time for me. Everything's running smoothly. And I was getting ready literally to release a program that was a 4-week program called Transition to Wellness. And I was Saturday night, I went out to a party, and the Sunday I was going to hit send on the email to promote the program, the very first one around chronic illness. And I woke up that morning and went to get up to go to the bathroom and fell to the floor. And the room was spinning, and I sort of crawled gently to the bathroom, but it was just really full on. And I phoned a girlfriend to take me to the emergency department because I lived alone. And they did some neurology testing and they couldn't find anything, and they thought it was just dizziness. Though I had the inane pleasure of a ER doctor saying to me, well, I don't want to scare you, because he couldn't work out what it was. I don't want to scare you. But this is quite similar to what people get with Parkinson's.
Oh, my goodness.
No evidence, nothing. No, there was no basis for his thing at all. It's just he didn't know what it was. No consult with a neurologist. He'd called one in. He was just planting that. And I had about 15 years worth of living with chronic illness. So I knew to just let it go through to the keeper, and it wasn't a real thing. I just knew how to read somebody's psyche and how to read what was happening for them to then decide if it was relevant information, which it wasn't.
Right.
And they kept me overnight. They sent me, gave me a slip to come back to maybe see them, went home, and I started to feel a bit better. So I was like, okay, all right. And 2 days later, it happened again. So at that point, somebody referred me to a clinic in Melbourne, Australia called the Dizzy Day Clinic, which specializes in vertigo and migraine and BPPV, etc.
Well, that's nice.
And so I went to see them, and she had a neurologist that she works with specifically, and she tested me and she said, she said, I'm not a neurologist. I'm pretty confident it's vertigo migraine. And it took 5 weeks to get in to see him. So I stayed with a friend because I had it 24/7.
Oh.
It didn't disappear. So I would go to sleep with it. I would roll over in bed and it would wake me. I would wake up in the morning, and that thing where you wake up and you're like, oh, it's still here.
Yes.
And then you would just run the day. And then I got in to see him, and we started a long, very long medication process. So that's really how the process began, and that's the diagnosis I ended up with.
Well, despite the ER visit, you were diagnosed fairly quickly then. I mean, 5 weeks is a long time when you're dealing with that, but well, that's good.
One of the reasons for that is I was so extreme, and I couldn't walk like my girlfriend, like I had to be steady to go. Is that because I was already on immunosuppressants, I was really clear about not wanting to take more medication or whatever, but the experience was so extreme and terrifying that I just would take whatever. And he said, look, I know this doesn't sound great to you. He said, but it can take a long time to help people get medication because the experience may be sort of come in and out. And he was right. It was a very slow journey with medication. I'm very, very, very sensitive to it. So I'm happy to share with you and everyone listening, because this is such a specialized podcast as well, that I started on amitriptyline, or NDEP in the US, but I got him down to 2.5 milligrams. So a quarter of a 10 milligram tablet is where we started. And then slowly built up. And that dose, I could feel that dose go into my system. It didn't, it gave me a little bit, but we slowly built up. And then I spent 2 years resisting the Botox conversation because I just thought that's poison. I'm not going to put that in my system. I wish to God I had started with Botox almost straight away, or whenever we were allowed to. Because as soon as that hit my system, I was so much better. Like it completely shifted the experience for me.
I'm so happy you mentioned that, because I've had people on that are reluctant to try it. I've had people on that they haven't had good results with it. So I'm happy to hear that you have, because I do know several people that have been on Botox and continue with the Botox.
Totally,
injections.
I continue. Yeah. So we're right down. The NDEP medication went up to 50 milligrams. I've had this diagnosis and been living with this since 2016, so 7 years. And it was really 2018 that I agreed to have a go at the Botox. I was scared. I was really scared. But I instantly felt, before I left the surgery, I felt better. And it completely changed and transformed the trajectory of my capacity. And I still continue to have it. And then we've reduced the medication, and it gives me a lot of cover. So it's for me, it's been life-saving. I would never say to somebody, this is the thing. I would just share with you, I gave it a go and it worked. And it did, just like, I don't know, it depends how people work with this, but the amitriptyline, when I went up a dose, it would always make me dizzy for a couple of weeks before it would settle. Like it would make it worse and then it would settle.
Right.
The Botox did that a fraction, but I stuck with it, and it's the reason I'm standing. It literally is the reason I'm standing.
Do you mind if I ask, are you still on the amitriptyline?
Yes, so we're down to 10 milligrams now of the amitriptyline, and we're, hoping to reduce that, like to get off that and just stay on Botox. So I went up to 50 and we went up by 2.5 milligrams. So it took a long time. And I will still occasionally work with vertigo, mostly the weather. So if there's a shift in the weather, I'll wake. If the Botox is wearing off, then I will get the vertigo, certain foods, or loud noise, like noise and lights will definitely bring it. But most of the time, I'm good.
You're good. How frequently do you get the Botox injections?
3 months, every 3 months.
Every 3 months? Okay. Do you feel as the 3 months, as you're coming to that next appointment, do you feel more dizzy, or do you feel
I used to feel that, then it completely stabilized, so I didn't get any wearing off. And then we started to reduce the amitriptyline, which was fine. And on this, we went from 15 to 10, and I got symptoms of the Botox wearing off this time for the first time, having reduced the medication. But we'll see. We're just going to see and stick with it and see what the system does.
I'm curious, Michelle, because we're about the same age, and our symptoms mine also began in 2016, as far as the vestibular issues. And the more I talk to people, I'm wondering if there's some kind of hormonal component.
Definitely.
Yeah, because I had a child late at 43, and then when she was 3 years old, the symptoms began, and that's when I also became perimenopausal. So I was like, whoa, yeah.
Mine came with perimenopause. My specialist said it's very common. And I had been on Depro, I don't know what you call it in the US, but as a contraception. And so it was time age-wise for me to come off that. So I came off that, and that really screwed the perimenopause and coming off the Depro. We can now probably see, while I had very significant migraines regularly, I would get 2 to 3 migraines a week. Seriously, I would come home from work, go to bed, throw up sometimes, eat a little, go to work the next day. But the combination of coming off the Depro and the perimenopause, he thinks sort of doubled the extremity of the symptoms. And yeah, I think that's all I have to say about that process. I understood that it was, and I'm always very happy to share that reality.
I have been going through your podcasts. I absolutely love them. And I hope that many of our listeners cross over and listen, because they're just so informative and powerful. And you're so gentle with all your guests. And I was wondering how you got from living with these living with migraine-associated vertigo to your programs of Queen of the Underworld and your emotional empowerment programs. Please tell us, because I think we all need to know about that. And I must tell you, when my episode for Life Rebalance Chronicle docuseries came out and you posted it on your stories, I don't remember the wording that you used, but it made me rethink my healing journey, because we get so stuck in the physical. Even though I watched through tears, and still when I watch that docuseries, it's very emotional for me. We forget about the emotional journey, and it's so important.
Yes. Yeah. So I would have definitely called you a magnificent woman, because that's what that's how I see every woman living with chronic illness. And so let's work through gently this process that I've been through, that both what I've been through personally also is what I've then done in terms of my work.
Right.
So for both my conditions, because I'd been in bed for long periods with the autoimmune condition, that's when I read mythology. And that was really a life and death conversation with me. And so it wasn't clear that I was going to live out of that process, or whether within 6 months I would be in an organ failure situation. And so I was just like, okay, well, if I'm going to die, what do I want to do before I die? And I'm in bed, so what can I do? Right. So as terrifying as that was, the vertigo condition was way more frightening, even though it wasn't life-threatening. But I could read and I could watch things. And yes, I had fatigue from the drugs and everything. But I really wanted to read the Iliad, and I just read that. And then I just immersed in mythology. And I found within mythology a psychological map for the experience that I was having. And that was really the Persephone myth, which is Queen of the Underworld. But actually that comes from a myth. That myth is 2,000 years old. That's a Greek myth. And that myth actually comes from 2,000 years before that, which is the Inanna myth. And in the Inanna myth, there's two goddesses, the Queen of the Heaven and the Queen of the Underworld. And they rule that. The gods don't rule that with them. They rule it. And then those goddesses are split into 12 goddesses by the time we get to the Greeks. And so the reason I'm sharing all of this is I really went in and listened to the feminine stories and the great myths and the world that revered the strength of the feminine and what the feminine was in her magnificence, and just the beauty and the power of that. And so these myths gave me comfort and a home. By the time I got to the vertigo experience, when I can't read, I can't write, I can't do anything on the computer, somebody sitting is swaying, so that's, having somebody visit is more difficult. I couldn't do anything. And so I asked myself the same question I had asked myself with the liver facing long periods of being in bed. And that was, how can I use this experience to be closer to myself or to be more deeply empowered? And with the vertigo, that was really hard because I couldn't do more things. And so the answer internally was, can you be more compassionate for yourself? And my answer was absolutely no. Frack, no, I cannot. And then the next question was, okay, can you have compassion for yourself that you can't have compassion for yourself? I was like, okay, that I could give a go. And I was really aware that the vertigo for me, the experience was a boot camp of compassion. That was it. It was just like, lift those muscles every day, training in compassion. Yeah. And I was clear that I didn't know how long this was going to go on for. I didn't know if I would ever have capacity again. But I knew that the compassion that I would build had to be built with myself. And it wasn't necessarily that I would use it for others, but that was what in my own psyche was the deepest thing that I could do. And I don't want to say it was missing. It was just, it called me into a deeper relationship with that. And so that's what I did, is I worked out all my processes for having compassion with myself and bringing gentleness to myself. And then as I slowly got better and returned to work, I worked from home. I would only go to the office when we were going to offices. I would have to wear sunglasses to the office. I couldn't go in the lift. I would take the stairs to the first floor, and people would come and have meetings with me on the first floor. As I got more capacity, I was able to get to the 19th floor, but the team would have a meeting. We would turn off all the lights in the meeting room so that I could take my sunglasses off and have the meeting. and I would have a little cubbyhole meeting room that the lights would be off, which meant that it was constantly people coming in because the lights were off, thinking the room was available despite the sign on the door.
Right.
And going back to work with Vertigo was, for me, was an extreme experience because I still had to have compassion because I couldn't navigate the floor without sunglasses. It just wasn't possible. And I could only stay for short periods, and I would cab in and cab out.
Mm-hmm.
All of this is to say that the work I was going to do got put on hold.
Right.
And then I slowly started to refine it and rebuild it. And I ran workshops for some not-for-profits. Once we got to 2020, my capacity was stronger and I was pretty good. I refused to work in the office because it's just the wrong place. So I worked all the time from home, and I went in about once a fortnight, once a month for a meeting. That was the meeting I went to. But I was done. I was done working in corporate. I was just done. And I had the opportunity to negotiate a package, and I negotiated a package out. They weren't offering it. It wasn't public, but I went and negotiated it based on medical. And that enabled me to really turn my attention to the work that I now do.
Mm-hmm.
And what I did with that is I enrolled in a year-long online business course with a woman that I'd met. And I was like, this is March, 1st or something. Like COVID was around, but I was like, I had already lined up to run workshops in hospitals. I was like, I don't really care about the online, but I might want to do that at the end of the year. But this woman knows business, so I'll do business. Of course, within 2 or 3 weeks, online was the only thing. And so I've never run a workshop in a hospital, and I have run all my programs online. But what I did with her was build the programs, learn how to do things online, learn how to do social media, learn the confidence, and nut everything out. So in 2021, I launched. And I launched with a women's summit called the Pajama Interviews. And then what you listen to on the podcast, which is the Pajama Interviews, all come out of the summit because I basically strip the audio and then release that 6 months later. So I've run 2 and we're going to run another one in September. And the summits are free for people to come to and listen to. And then 6 months later, they get released on a weekly podcast. So that's the long sort of weave. But I took it as everything step by step, and I took it in relationship with my capacity. And I looked for what my capacity could do at each and every step rather than try and work it all out and then be defeated. I just knew that just like taking medication, you have to take it step by step.
Right. I love that. I love that. So as you were trying to regain yourself, to find yourself again, you were kind of tracking it
I tracked it.
Yeah. So did you go with it in mind to do it for others, or is it just for yourself?
So the two, all of the content comes from both experiences of the autoimmune, because I had that since I was 35 and I'm now 52. So all of it, I had to negotiate work with that. I had to negotiate work with the vertigo. I was bedbound. I returned to work from both those conditions. I negotiated.
I love that they worked with you.
Yeah, well, I learned to negotiate hard. And by that, I mean, I learned to negotiate from a very grounded position where I didn't wobble.
Right.
And I learned how to read all the policies, which I was good at, and negotiate step by step. And I didn't negotiate with a full 2-year plan. I negotiated with my capacity each and every step along the way. And so I worked out how to do that, which is what I teach women how to do. So yes, I tracked myself. In the mythology, when I was sort of working deeply with that for a long period of time, I would just ask myself, okay, so where do I feel? What do I feel? And I would get a visual. I teach the mythology, but I really teach it with the depth and power that comes from the Sumerian myth. And I teach the emotional map, which is the other piece you're asking about.
Right.
And the emotional map came from me looking at internally at myself and just saying, what does this feel like? And I would get the visual of being at sea. And then I would see myself in a little boat. And that was it. And then I worked out, okay, well, what do I do now with that boat? And what are the tools to help me? And then as I got a little more capacity, I asked myself, what does it feel like? And that ended up being the 4 emotional stages of chronic illness that I now teach.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Because I know that as I was reviewing some of your programs, you dive into like the relationships that you have with your illness. And instead of waiting till you're better to learn how to deal with that now, the chronic illness, and have a relationship with it, that's not all positive.
Correct. Yeah. So I'm in no way cured. I'm not one of those people who have a cure story. I'm certainly extremely well and much, much better. And I'm, on my process of looking to reduce medication and all of those things. But for me, it was really clear that everybody treated me as if this was this most horrendous thing. And it was extremely difficult. But it wasn't this sad pity case that everybody wanted to respond to, or that they were like, oh my God, I don't know how you cope. And it's like, well, I don't really have a choice. So I'm just doing my thing.
I never know how to respond to that.
It's not a magical thing. It's like, it's just what I'm doing.
Right.
But through that, I learned to build what I think of as sovereignty. So this incredible emotional sovereignty, which is being self-referenced power. That's what it means. So I'm referencing my power internally, not externally in relationship to everybody else. And I'm standing what I think of as my sacred ground. Even if I'm lying in bed with vertigo, I'm on my sacred ground and I'm communicating and relating to others from that position. I am not running my nervous system, my well-being, how I'm doing in the world through everybody else's nervous system and then making a decision about me. I'm running it through mine. And what that means is that then I speak from that place, friends, family, clinicians, colleagues, managers. This is the space I speak from. And what that does is that sets the tone for the relationship, because you can hear it in my voice. It's like, this is not a conversation that we're having about what Michelle should be doing. Michelle is in full clarity about what works for her. And with clinicians, they are her advisors, and she will take the advice and she will make decisions. And that's really the skill that I built. And all of the tools about how did I get that? Like, it wasn't just a decision. There's actually exercises I made for myself to practice. All of that sort of 18 years worth of work is what I've distilled down to then teach women. So we don't have to go through the process where you can just get it. And to give an example of how fast this can be, every year I run a 6-month program called Queen of the Underworld. And sure, we talk about the myth, but we actually do the practicals about how to have this life with chronic illness from your sovereignty. And our 2022 women are, 2023 women are currently in that program. And we're currently doing what I call the archetypes of power. It's a deeply embodied process, but you can get this shift into your power within 2 minutes in your body. It's something I only teach in Queen of the Underworld because of the level of depth that it takes. And we spend 2 months preparing for this process. But once we're in it, like, everybody's like, oh my God, I used to have to do an hour of yoga and then breathing exercises to feel this centered. And it's actually you and your body. And so everything is built And the emotional empowerment process that we do, we teach similar tools. It's just that in Queen of the Underworld, we have 6 months, so we have a lot more time to actually land them. And then they're different commitments and they're different participation. But the emotional map, 7 weeks in emotional map, oh my God, we will get the transformation in 7 weeks. And that's, there's so many women now who've been through the program. So the joy for me is I worked it out for myself. I then worked out how to teach it. But the biggest joy is it works. It works. And so every woman who comes in leaves with her sovereignty.
I love that. I love that. I know that boundaries are so huge and so difficult to set, especially when you're not feeling well and you're mourning your previous self. So you really don't know where to start. And this sounds like it's just all encompassed and learning to trust yourself again and all of that. I love it. Can you tell us a little bit more, Michelle, about the emotional map that you've created?
Yeah. So the emotional map really came out of this question of where am I? And now I just want to set this up because the physical journey of chronic illness is complex and difficult. The emotional and mental journey to me is equally difficult, if not more so, because you are consistently with yourself. You've got people coming, checking in and offering you help, or if you lived alone like I did, you're sort of trying to wrangle people to help. But all of this is an emotional process and it takes an emotional toll when you don't have that much bandwidth or capacity. Mm-hmm. And so what I did was try and work out for myself, okay, what does it feel like emotionally? And then what are the tools to help myself emotionally? I did not land, okay, we're in a boat and I'll show you the map in a second. And then oh, this is the answer. That is not how it worked. Right. It worked by trial and error and testing and that, which is this is not the map that I would have, if somebody had come and said to you, oh, can you teach me the map? It's oh, well, there's sort of this thought and there's sort of this feeling. It would be you trying to work it out now.
Yes.
But I have this skill where I can see it for myself and logic myself. And then I have the skill where I can teach it. That's just part of who I am. So what I want to do is share with you. So the emotional map looks like this. It's the 4 emotional stages of chronic illness. This comes out of my psyche. This is fully available on the website for free. You can watch the video as I describe it. For those of you listening on the podcast, you'll be able to hear me. I'll talk through the stages, and I'm sure Heather will put in the notes exactly the link to it. So the 4 emotional stages of chronic illness. Stage 1 is you're out at sea. And it's really, for me, I just had this visual of you cannot see land and you're in, well, where am I? And I was I'm in a little boat. And this for me was where I don't know what's going to happen. I may or may not have a diagnosis. I certainly can't see where the treatment's going to work. I can't do anything. So I just have to be in the boat. But I do have a boat. And I do have clinicians, or I do have some sort of just anything that gives a little bit of stability. But emotionally, I can be with myself and see myself in the container of the boat. And this gave me a sense of, well, if you're in the boat and you're out at sea in the unknown, it's not the time to try and work out how to get back to the office. You're in a boat in the middle of the sea, there's no land. And so I was okay, what can I do while I'm at sea? And so for me, particularly with the vestibular, because that's literally feeling like you're at sea, the map really came alive through the vestibular migraine. It's well, I need water on my side desk. And I need the room dark. And what are all the things that make it easier for me emotionally? What is the connection that I have with myself? How do I schedule a friend to visit, even if it's once a week? What do I need emotionally while I'm here? The next stage of the emotional map, if you imagine that somehow the boat, you're out of the boat, and you've washed up on the beach and you're just like flat, like you've just literally drenched and you've washed up on land. That was the feeling. And so emotionally, it's like, okay, I made it to land. I can't stand. But we made it somewhere. Treatment's working a little. I've got just a little bit of new medication, or my test results have improved. And so while I'm washed up on my beach, I'm just actually emotionally recovering. And I'm emotionally recovering from being at sea and the stress of being at sea. This is the point at which most people go, oh, you're better. Great. See you later. And so emotionally, you actually need more support at this sort of level, but you have to understand that you're just washed up on the beach. It's not the time to say, okay, I've got a little bit of energy. I'm going to run a marathon. There is a time for that. This is not that time. So I was like, okay, I'm washed up on the beach. That's what it feels like. What helps here? And then it was like, oh, I have a little more capacity, or I have a little more agency. What helps here is to know that I have this capacity. What helps here is to know that I've landed on land. And so this way of communicating and talking to myself, and then thinking what helps physically, what helps emotionally, what helps mentally, what helps creatively, what helps me. The next stage is where you actually start to feel better. And I see this as you start, I just had like, where am I? And I had this sense of like, oh, I'm in the forest and I'm just walking gently towards the stream or something. And it's quieter here. I have more capacity. I have more emotional feeling of, just a bit more connection with others. I feel better. And so my only job here is just to enjoy that I have capacity. And in a practical sense, this is where you might be returning to work, you might be taking on more hours, you might be doing a creative project, you might socialize a little more, you might feel that you have more capacity around a lot of decisions because you have more mental capacity. But you're just walking through the forest. It's very peaceful. The final stage is what I call return to the village. Sharing the wisdom with the world. It basically stabilizes into your new normal. And here's where you have an integration emotionally, and you start to integrate where you've been, and you start to really solidify your sovereignty. These are the 4 emotional stages. Now, one new symptom, one new diagnosis, one blood test, and you are back at sea. You can be emotionally at sea, physically at sea. You can get, again, one treatment that works like Botox, and you're like returning to the village. It's not linear. So it's never to be seen as linear emotionally. It's an emotional map. Emotions aren't linear.
Yeah.
So what I do with this map is give you something so that you can visually feel and see where you are. And the biggest question to ask yourself is, where am I? And then you can start to feel out what helps here. That's the next question. What helps here?
Wow.
All of this is what I teach in a 7-week course called Emotional Empowerment. We go through the map, but we actually teach you the skills for navigating it. But if you go and, grab it on the website, you'll get a PDF, a little download journal, which I'm sure, Heather, you might have looked at, and that'll help you get started yourself.
That is wonderful. That is wonderful. I think we get so fixated on wanting a quick fix and that magic pill. Even whenever I started the podcast, I was almost afraid of telling people I was better because I didn't think anyone would believe me because I had so much work to do. And but it's work that pays off if you invest in yourself and whatever that looks like for you. And you have to be ready. A lot of people at the beginning, I know that I wouldn't have listened to anything when I was going through my 6 months of vertigo. I would have been, that's the last thing I want to hear is that I'm going to have to work on myself.
I'd like to talk to that. One of the things about that is This notion of working on ourselves, I flip that and say, I'm just allowing and listening to myself.
I love that.
I'm not trying to emotionally fix anything for myself. In fact, the map is my experience of my emotions, because the first thing was in the map is, what does this feel like? It wasn't, where do I want to be emotionally? It was, what does it feel like? And so I don't personally feel that there is anything to work on.
Okay.
All I am doing is listening more deeply to myself, because I'm listening to somebody. Like, I'm listening to culture, I'm listening to others, I'm listening to, all of the ancestral patterning, I'm listening to what's, the voices from parents or friends or whatever. This was really a process of listening to me. And that's where the sovereignty lies, is listening to yourself and being able to discern, this is actually what I think and feel. And that voice that says, come on, get up, go. Why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you better? Even that voice that says there's something to fix, that's not an internal voice. That's an inherited voice.
Sure.
And so the process is discernment of what's actually my relationship with myself. And so for anybody, I've got women who come to me with long COVID, and they've come very early in their process. And I'm delighted that they've come so early, because when they go through the course and they get the map, they haven't spent 15 years trying to work it out. We've got it. And so their experience of a flare, they have the map already instilled to know how to work with it when they're back at sea or when they feel better. And the feedback from those women is, oh my God, even though it's distressing, I'm not as distressed as I would have been without the map.
Right.
And it's giving me ground. And that is all we are looking for emotionally, is emotional ground. And that is something you build in relationship with yourself. It's not something you have to learn. It's already there. It's that we uncover it and reveal it to yourself so you can, in inverted commas, stand on it. So you can lie on it. So you can speak from it. So you can share from it. That's what makes the difference. We're not teaching you something that you have to learn to get out there and then formulate. We're revealing something that is already there. That's why it's easy. That's why every woman gets the results, because it's her experience of herself.
That's it. That's empowering. It really is.
That's the empowering piece.
Yes, I feel the gentleness of it just by the words of your emotional map. It's giving yourself grace and stepping into your own power.
Yeah.
I know I haven't taken your course yet, but that is one thing that living with these disorders that has taught me how to trust myself and to be able to set those boundaries and be true to who I am.
Yes.
Regardless of my upbringing or what is expected of me, and that always being the good girl and breaking all that down. So that's one thing. And I think this does it, but on a totally different level. And I love that.
Yes. And the thing is, I always say, chronic illness is the doorway to your power. It's not the door you would have chosen, but it is the doorway, because you have to get bound. You actually don't have a choice. You end up with badass boundaries out of the process, because it's the only way to move through the experience. So everything that I'm sharing is just the code for what's happening in the experience.
Right. Badass boundaries.
Badass boundaries. If you're interested in badass boundaries, on the website, you can purchase, just from the digital shop, there's a masterclass with the badass boundaries, which has a full masterclass and a download journal for you to learn how to have them. And it takes you through the process of how to have the badass boundary in lots of different situations. So all of the work that I'm teaching, I've made accessible at different points. You can listen to the podcast like this and we'll talk about it and you'll get access. You can go to the digital shop and you can, have something self-paced at various prices that are really accessible. then you can do a 7-week program, or you can do a 3-month program or a 6-month program. So that is what I built, because I know what it's like living with chronic illness. You have different intellectual, like mental capacity and emotional stamina. It depends whether you can listen to it on audio or watch it. Everything I build is both in video and an audio version. So if audio is better for you, you can listen to it and you still get the content.
It's fabulous. It sounds like you've thought of everything as far as how to get out there. And I love that. I love that.
Yeah, I wanted to make it. I made it for myself internally, and then I just wanted it to be in the world, because nobody teaches you how to navigate it emotionally. They'll teach you mindset, or, you'll go to therapy and they'll try and talk to you about depression or things. And that may or may not be your experience. What you're doing is living with chronic illness, and that has an emotional impact. So nobody teaches the map. The map comes out of my own intellectual and creative core. And this is the way to navigate it emotionally. That's what I'll teach you.
Fabulous. So great. Is there any way we can support you in the community?
Yeah, look, I love you to engage. I'm happy for you to share. If you listen to the podcast, which is called the Pajama Interviews, just like yours, Heather, a little review really helps. And on the 12th of September, we are going to run another chronic illness summit. This will be career and chronic illness. So how to navigate your career while living with chronic illness. There is a new map that I'm about to release, which is how to navigate career and chronic illness. And it's like the emotional map, except it's specifically for career. It has the 5 different experiences you will have living with chronic illness and working, including when you can't work and then when you return to work. Beautiful. It all comes from myself internally. I will be running a 3-month career and chronic illness program starting in September after the summit, which you can come, and we will teach you the map, but we will also teach you all of the tools for navigating your career in an empowered way. How to have the conversations, how to stand in your power while having them, how to negotiate, how to live with uncertainty while navigating your career. So it's a beautiful new body of work that I'm releasing, and it's the final piece in what I will teach now. And that 3-month program is fantastic if you're looking to transition back to work or you're working. If you are not working and you're a bit more at sea, then either the Emotional Empowerment Program, 7 weeks, or the Queen of the Underworld program is the right program for you there. So what I'm sharing with you is we will run the free summit. You will be able to register for that. We will have the registration page up in about mid-August. And Heather, I'm sure we'll be able to share it with you and share it with everybody as well.
Absolutely.
You will be able to register, and then you will have about 4 to 5 days where we'll drop all the interviews. We've got some really amazing people speaking. I only choose people who are living with the experience and have something to share with you about how to navigate it in an empowered way. That's how I choose guests. It's very carefully curated so that you have the experience of this wealth of magnificent women. And for the career and chronic, it will be women and men. And then you have the opportunities to go deeper. So that's really what I would share with you now. And that will give everybody the opportunity to come and share and listen. And we'll have a 5-day community around the event.
Oh, I love that. Well, we will keep in touch, and I will definitely share that with the community when it gets closer. Let me ask you, Michelle, I know that the programs are geared more towards women. Do you see yourself branching out to men later on, or anything
so
like
with
that?
Men, I do work with men, but only privately currently. So people can work with me privately. For the career and chronic, we will have the content that's accessible for men and women. I will teach the first couple of programs for women, but we have someone in mind to come and work with us to facilitate some of the men through the program as well. And certainly for career and chronic, it will be male and female. It's or non-binary. All of that is welcome.
Awesome.
What I'm doing, as everybody does in a business, is you build your pieces, and you build one piece, and then you build the next piece, and then you expand. Yes. So as everybody comes, this will be the first summit. I will have men guests, and it will be for men and women. And just like our capacity, you get a little and then you expand a little more. Mm-hmm. I run my business the same way, so that I'm never trying to do everything for everyone. I'm doing what works for me and my body at any one point in time.
I just want to sit with that a minute.
Yeah.
Yes.
This is what chronic illness will teach you, is how to be with yourself one step at a time, and what works for you and your body. Mm-hmm. And that is what I both do personally. That is what I do professionally. Mm-hmm. Everything is geared to what works for me and my body first. Mm-hmm. And I'm not interested in the big rules for everybody else. Mm-hmm. And I learned how to do this at work for myself, how to negotiate to do it this way. And so that's just given me the ramp to then come and do, this is my soul's work. But I did this over 15 years of working while living with chronic illness.
Yeah. This is awesome. I'm so glad you agreed to come on today.
It's my pleasure, Heather.
Thank you. Well, before I let you go, I wanted to end on something a little fun that I call whirlwind questions. Is there anything else you want to share before we jump in?
No, I think just, pop over onto the socials. You'll see that there's lots of content on the socials. And say hi. I'd be very happy to hear and see you.
Awesome. And I will leave all your links below. What has living with a vestibular disorder taught you?
Endurance.
That's for sure. Fill in the blank. Vestibular disorders are
a golden doorway into self-compassion.
Oh, that's beautiful. It definitely is. And, I have people that approach me. We just did a book for Meniere's disease. I'm not sure if you saw that. Yes. And a lot of my things in there that I wrote, I shared a few essays, were more positive. And I am approached often with, how can you approach Meniere's disease with positivity? It's not that I love this disease, but it has shown me a life that I would not have had without it.
Yes.
And it has made me slow down. And for that, I have created a place for Meniere's disease where I own it and I love it the best I can, and it's hard.
Yeah, I think it's like you have a couple of choices. You can fight it. Mm-hmm. And it's not that I'm positive about that per se. It's just like, I want to be in relationship with everything in a way that works for me. And if I'm fighting it emotionally, I'm draining my own energy. So therefore, how do I encompass it? But it's not even the illness I'm in relationship with. It's myself. I'm in relationship with myself.
I love that perspective. It's so true.
Yeah.
Yeah. The next question is, you feel your symptoms coming on. What's the first thing that you do, Michelle?
So the first thing I do is lie down and get stable, in terms of make sure I've got everything on the table, cancel everything if required. And then the next thing I do in that is I chat to myself. Mm-hmm. So one of the things is, what happens with these conditions is it activates anxiety. That's what's happening in the brain. Anxiety is part of the condition. Mm-hmm. So I always have this chat to myself that says, sweetheart, I know you feel really anxious. That's part of this condition. Anxiety always turns up. It's okay to feel anxious, and I'm with you, and it will pass. And I know that when we're here together, it doesn't feel like it will pass, and it's frightening, but it will pass. So those are the two things I do.
That's lovely. What is one thing that people usually get wrong about you?
I'm pretty authentic. So I think people come into a relationship with me. I think one of the things about being public and teaching this work is that you might think like, oh, she's got it together because she knows the map or something. It's like, no, I built the map to help me navigate the experience. Like, so I want you to see that. So yes, I have a lot of tools. I have them because I practice them. Right. It's not like innate in terms of I just made a map and then everything's okay. It's like, no, I use the map for myself. So that dialogue I just shared with you is how I learn to speak to myself when I'm in the sea of the unknown. That's one of the steps in my tools for the sea of the unknown. Right. So I think people might think it's like, oh, she's got it all together. It's like, no, I just learned how to build my muscles to navigate this experience.
Yes, I can see that. What is your favorite vestibular friendly meal?
Oh, I don't know that I have one because I don't pay as much attention to my food.
I
would have something, not so much, like I definitely know don't have chocolate and sweets. But I would have, particularly because of the nausea, I will have the blandest thing I can. So it might be a baked potato because it's easy. You pop the potato in the oven, you leave it alone. And then I'll have that with a little bit of cheese potentially on top or something, just butter and cheese. So something as simple as possible.
What is your favorite book or novel?
I have to say my favorite book is still Lord of the Rings. I read it when I was 13 and I really love that is an amazing, there's so many characters and there's some beautiful female characters, but the adventure of it, but also that is the journey of the unknown. And that is the journey of finding power and the process and facing the really, really scary things. And I think that really, I feel like every book that I might read after that still has that sort of embedded process in it.
Yeah. Wow. I have yet to read it. I've started it, but I have never. It's my daughter's more, let's just watch the movies.
Yes. Well, there weren't movies when I read it, so I'm sure I would have been exactly the same.
Do you have a morning or bedtime routine of self-care?
So every morning I wake up, I have Chani Nichols, she's an astrologer app, and I do her morning meditation. And then depending on, because I'm in Australia, I will often be on calls with women in the US because most of my clients are based in North America. So I will do that. But if I don't have an immediate thing to hop onto, I will journal. And I will, or after the call, I will journal. And what I'm looking for is just what I'm thinking, what I'm feeling. There might be meditation, but I take the day slowly while also then, running an international business and creating lots of courses and content.
Yes, you are busy. But I love that. The stream of consciousness kind of journaling.
Stream of consciousness. Yeah, my approach is to be gentle with myself so that when I feel, oh, I've got a lot on or I've got a lot of to-do list, I'm always, you don't have to push through, everything gets done. And I always look at everything has been done. I have lots of free choice. I don't have to drive myself with the list. The list serves me.
I need you in my back pocket. I need these things. My lists have lists.
Yes. Which adds to the emotional and mental strain, which is why I'm always looking for, this is adding to my emotional and mental strain. So we need to redirect this, because I don't want to be adding to my emotional and mental strain. I want to be in relationship with myself.
I love that. What is on your nightstand, Michelle? You might call it something different there. I'm not sure.
Nope, that is.
Okay.
So at the moment, there's a beautiful rose quartz crystal. There's always 3 glasses of water. There's the journal book. And every week or so, there'll be a different novel.
Similar to mine. I always have books sitting there. What is an activity that completely relaxes you?
It's sad but true that meditation usually completely relaxes me, which is annoying because I resist it. I love a deep bath, and I always make room for that, to give myself water to be in and practice just everything's okay in the candles, with the bubble bath. It's all good.
Yeah, that's lovely. And I know we talked about your most used tool in your vestibular toolbox, and it's already escaped me. Was that just your self-talk?
Self-talk is the most useful tool for me, is the talking to myself when I'm in the experience.
Yes.
Gently.
That's great. And what is one thing you're extremely grateful for today?
Look, I think I'm really grateful. I feel a lot of joy in my life. I'm really grateful to be here with you, that we can discover each other across the oceans around these conditions. That's really only happened in the last couple of years, I think, since COVID really blew that out. It was harder to find each other. And I am really happy to work with women and see them flourish. And it brings me the greatest amount of joy to watch a woman feel her sovereignty.
I love that. And I can't wait to hear feedback from anybody in the community that takes your programs, because I can just feel it deep inside, how genuine and just wonderful this is going to be. It's just been a delight, Michelle. Thank you so much for being here.
You're welcome, Heather. Take care.
I walked away from this conversation lighter, as if I had just meditated. Michelle's energy is palpable, and I absolutely love that. I'm so happy our paths crossed, and even happier to pass her wonderful knowledge on to you. She's on a mission to de-shame and transform conversations around illness, and I'll be honest, she has me rethinking just how I say things, both internally to myself and to you. I will leave all the ways to reach out to Michelle in the show notes, her websites, her podcast, and all her social media handles. I hope to see you in some of her classes. If you have a question for Michelle or would like to comment on this episode or another, please share with me either by email or reviewing on social media. Thank you so much for being here. I have a question for you this week, and I would love for you to leave me a voice message so I can share in future episodes. I would love to hear from you, and I can't express this enough. You can leave the answer or just a general message at www.speakpipe.com/Meniere's Muse. Now, my question: what is the best advice someone has given you since developing your vestibular something? Whether it was a physician, a therapist, friend, parent, child, or a total stranger, leave me a voice message and share that advice with us. It may be just what someone needs to hear today. Thank you so much for being here. We all have a story. Let yours inspire others. If you would like to share your inspiring story with others, or know someone that has a story others would benefit from hearing, please reach out to me. It's all about connection after all. For more information on vestibular disorders, please visit the VITA website at www.vestibular.org. Thank you for listening, and remember to love and be gentle with yourself. Lean on this beautiful community, and lastly, believe that healing is possible. I'll see you next week, warriors.